Hello, we're going to be doing some work on finding areas of triangles today, and firstly we've got a couple of starters to do. The first one's a wordy one and the second one isn't. So let's have a look at this first one. Have a read through it. If you know what you're doing, just pause the video and bash on with it. Okay, so I'm making a smoothie. The ingredients are 20 grams of oats, 60 grams of natural yoghurt, 130 grams of frozen fruit and 10 grams of honey. When I've blitzed these ingredients together, I add some water. The finished smoothie weighs 335 grams. What weight of water did I add? So how we're going to work that out? We know what the total weight is. It's 335 grams, and we know that before we add the water, we've put all those things together. Okay, so we'll need to know what the total is of those weights, won't we? Nice easy addition to do here. Zeros down the right hand side. Then 2 add 6 is 8. Add 3 is 11. Add 1 is 12. And then 1 and 1 is 2. So these ingredients together weigh 220 grams. The whole smoothie, once I've added the water, weighs 335 grams. So if I work out the difference between this total and 335, that'll tell me how much water I've added. So 5 take away 0 is 5, 3 take away 2 is 1, 3 take away 2 is 1. So the answer to what weight of water did I add was 115 grams. But just as a by the way, 1 gram of water is the same amount as 1 milliliter of water. Okay, that doesn't work for other substances. Okay, it's only for water because some things are denser or relatively more heavy than water or lighter. So 1 gram of water is exactly the same as 1 milliliter. Okay, but the answer, because the question was what weight, so the answer was 115 grams. Okay. Right, and then we've got a fraction to do. Find 2/3 of 43 pounds 11. So remember, to find a fraction of an amount, you divide by the denominator and multiply by the numerator. So we're going to do 43 pounds 11 divided by 3, and then we're going to multiply that by 2. So 3 into 4 goes once. We've got 1 left over, remember. 3 into 13 goes 4 times. And that's 12, so you've got 1 left over. Keep your points in line for division. 3 into 11 goes 3 times, 3 threes are 9, so that leaves us 2 left over. And 3 into 21 goes 7. So if the question had been find 1/3 of 43 pounds 11, the answer would be 14 pounds 37. But that's not the question. The question is 2/3. So we need to multiply the 14 pounds 37 by 2. So 7 2s are 14. 3 2s are 6. Add the 1 is 7. 4 2s are 8. 1 2 is 2. And remember, we've got 2 decimal places in the question, so we need 2 decimal places in the answer. So our complete answer is £28.74. So on to today's work. Yesterday we looked at area of squares and rectangles, and remember we had a formula for that. Today we're going to look at area of right-angled triangles, and then tomorrow we're going to look at the area of non-right-angled triangles. Okay, so here's a little recap of yesterday's work. So a rectangle has a length and a breadth. And remember, it doesn't matter which is which, because to find the area, all we're doing is multiplying them together. Okay, so for example, if the length of this rectangle was 10 centimetres and the breadth was 5 centimetres, then the area would be 10 times 5, which would be 50, and it would be square centimetres. So that's what you practiced yesterday. And remember, it doesn't really matter whether you write down 10 times 5 or 5 times 10. because the answer is the same. Okay? So, let's have a think about this situation. If we split our rectangle in half diagonally, I hope you can see that regardless of what the length and the breadth are, if we were to chop this rectangle in two, then what we would find is that this triangle here is exactly the same size and shape as that triangle there. Okay, so we could cut this rectangle in two, and then we could say that the area of the triangle, the shaded area there, is a half of the area of the rectangle. Okay. All right. So let's say we had the same numbers as we've got at the top there. If the length and breadth of the rectangle were 10 centimetres and 5 centimetres, then the area of the triangle would be 5 times 10 or 10 times 5, and then you would have to half that. Okay, so it'd be 50 divided by 2, so it'd be 25 square centimetres. So this area would be 25 square centimetres, and that area would be 25 square centimetres. Okay. Now let's have a look at this first triangle here. So we want to work out the area of the triangle, but we haven't got a formula yet for area of a triangle, so let's just think about making this triangle into a rectangle. Okay, so if we made that into a rectangle, then we can see that the area of the triangle is half of the area of the rectangle. And we know that the area of a rectangle is length times breadth, so what we'd be working out, we'd be multiplying the 10 and the 6 together. Remember, it doesn't matter what way round. And then we would need to half that to get the area of the triangle. So the area of the complete rectangle, drawn very badly by me there, would be 60 square centimetres. So you would half that to get the area of the triangle, which would be 30 square centimetres. Okay, but obviously it's a bit of a mess really, isn't it, when you have to start drawing these rectangles. So let's do it again for this one. So we've got 4.8 metres by 2 metres. So we've got a nice right angled triangle there. I'm using a ruler now, so sorry if it clatters and makes a bit of a noise. If we make this into a rectangle, and we can do this because of the right angle in the triangle. If we make that into a rectangle, we can see that if we'd been asked for the area of the rectangle, we would be doing length times breadth, so it would be 4.8 times 2, but we don't have the whole rectangle, we've only got half of it, so what we'd need to do is 4.8 times 2, and then you're going to have to half that. So 4.8 times 2, you can either do 4.8, add 4.8, or you can double it in your head. You get 9.6, and then divided by 2. Well, hang on a minute, if we've just multiplied something by 2, if we've just doubled it, and then we half it again, we're going to get back to the 4.8. So that would be 4.8, not centimetres, square metres, because our units are in metres for this one. Okay, so let's have a think about a formula now, because what we don't really want to have to do is draw a rectangle every time we need to find the area of a triangle. So let's have a think. So the area of a triangle is half the area of the surrounding rectangle. Okay, so it's a half. Now, in a triangle, we don't call it length and breadth, we call it base and height. So the b times h, base times height, is the area of the rectangle. And so b stands for base, h stands for height. So you're working out half of the area of the surrounding rectangle. And this is the formula that we use, and we sometimes write that without the times in it, just a half BH. Okay, we're going to see how this works in a minute. But the question that I want us to think about is, why don't we use length and breadth? Why are we using base and height when we were talking about a rectangle, it's got a length and a breadth? So why, when we use a triangle, all of a sudden are we talking about base and height? Well, let's think about this. If we were to measure the height of a person, where would we measure from? Okay, so we want to measure to the top of the person's head, but do we measure from away over here, or away over there, or straight down to the ground? Well, the answer to that is that if you're measuring the height of a person, you are measuring straight down to the ground, okay? You're making a right angle with the ground, okay? Otherwise, you don't get the right answer, because if you measured from the top of your head to over there, you might be about 7 or 8 feet tall, okay? Or even further if you're measuring there. So there is where you measure height, okay? Also, if we're measuring the height of this building, we don't measure it to over here somewhere, and we don't measure it to over there somewhere. If we're measuring the height of something, we measure it right down to the ground where we make a right angle with the ground, okay? So the point of using base and height with a triangle is we need to make sure that the base and height are at right angles to each other, okay? So, for example, if you've got a triangle, excuse me, drawing with that ruler again. If you've got a triangle with a base of 5 centimetres and a height of 7 centimetres, and if you were also given the length of the third side, that's 8.6 centimetres, then to find the area of this triangle, if we're thinking about the surrounding rectangle, we've got to take into account where the right angle is, okay? It doesn't make sense to use this line as either the base or the height, because it's not at right angles to anything. If we were going to try and make a rectangle out of using that line, we haven't got any other lines that are at right angles to it, whereas if we use these two, then we can make that into a rectangle. So the base and the height of a triangle must be at right angles to each other, or the formula doesn't work, because we don't get the surrounding rectangle then. Okay, so area is a half, base times height. Remember, it's base and height, it's not length and breadth. It doesn't make sense to talk about the length and breadth of a triangle. Okay, so we're going to practice using the formula now. Find the area of each triangle using the formula A equals a half B times H. So this is what you would be working out if you were doing an exercise. So you don't need to draw the rectangles around the triangles anymore. So like with the area of rectangles and squares, we write our formula down. We have a look at our diagram and we see, do we have the base and the height? Well, remember they've got to be at right angles to each other, so you've got to choose the lines that are at right angles. So we've got a half of 4 times 6. Okay. Now, we can rewrite that slightly differently. Okay. In maths, of means times. So we can write that as a half times 4 times 6. Okay. Now, when we're working out the answer to this, it doesn't matter what order we do it in because it's multiplying. So what we can do is we can work out a half of 4 and then times our answer by 6. Or we could work out a half of 6 and then times the answer by 4. Or we can do 4 times 6 and half the answer. It doesn't matter. So let's do it this way. 4 times 6 is 24, and a half of 24 is 12. So this is 12 square centimetres. Okay, so remember, you don't have to do the multiplying in the order that it's said. And remember that in maths, of is the same as times. Okay. Right, next one. It's a triangle, so we're going to write area is a half base times height. Now, we need to think about this one quite carefully because we've got all 3 lengths of the triangle given to us. So one of those is not going to be used. So what we need to look at is which 2 measurements are at right angles to each other. So that would be the 12 centimetres and the 5 centimetres. So we're not using the 13 centimetres in our area calculation because remember, using the 12 and the 5 will give us the rectangle. So we do a half times 12 times 5. Remember, it doesn't matter what order you get the 12 and the 5 in. So let's this time do it a half of 12 and then multiply our answer by 5. So a half of 12 is 6, and we're going to times that by 5, so that'll give us 30 square centimetres. We would have got the same answer if we'd done 12 times 5, which is 60, and then halved it. Okay, it doesn't matter what order you do it, remember? So the next one, again, finding the area of a triangle. So you write down the formula that you're going to use, and then you plug your numbers into the formula. So looking at which 2 lengths or which 2 sides are at right angles to each other. The 6 and the 8 are at right angles to each other. The 10 isn't at right angles to any other side. So we're doing a half of, so the base is 8 and the height is 6. Oh, see what I mean? 6. So this time we'll do, what did we do last time? So we did, okay, so this time we're going to do a half of 8 and then we'll times our answer by 6. So a half of 8 is 4, so we need to multiply that by 6. 4 sixes are 24, and we've got metres for our lengths, so we need square metres for our area. Okay, so that's how simple these are. You multiply the 2 lengths together that are at right angles to each other, and then you half that. Okay, so the last one. Of this sort. So area is a half base times height. So remember, the base and the height have to be at right angles to each other. So this is the line that we're not using, the length that we're not using. Okay, we're using the 10 and the 24. And it doesn't matter which order we get them in. Because if you turn your device on its side, if you lock the screen, then you can see that you would have the 24 across the way and the 10 up the way, and the 26 would be there. So your base and height would be the 24 and the 10. Okay, get rid of that messy bit. Right, so we can either do 10 times 24 and then half our answer, or we could do a half of 10 and then times our answer by 24. Or we could do a half of 24 and then times our answer by 10. So let's do that this time because we haven't done it that order, have we? So a half of 24 is 12. And then we want to multiply that by 10. So that'll give us 120 square millimetres. Okay. So remember, the order of multiplying or finding a half of doesn't matter as long as you're only halving once. What you don't do is half of 10 and then half of 24 because that means you're halving twice, so that doesn't work. Okay? So So, right, we've got one more to look at, and I wanted to give you one where it was on a bit of a tilt. So we might think, looking at this, because this line is at the bottom, that that's the base. But if that line is the base, neither of these two lines are at right angles to it. That's not a right angle, and that's not a right angle. So if 100 was the base, we don't have the height. Okay? So what we need to just remember is that the base and the height need to be at right angles to each other, and we could turn this triangle around. So we can say that the area is a half base times height. So a half. So the base and the height are the two sides that are at right angles to each other. So that's the 60 and the 80. And it doesn't matter what order they go in, remember, because it doesn't matter what order we multiply. So I think we'll do a half of 60 first, and then we'll times it by 80. Okay, so a half of 60 is 30, and we're going to multiply that by 80. Now we're going to do this without writing down a chimney sum at all. So remember, 30 times 80, so 30 times 80 would be 30 times 8, and then times 10. Okay, so 3 8s are 24, so 30 times 8 would be 240, and if you multiply that by 10, you get 2,400, and it would be square metres. Okay, another way of writing this down, you could have written 3 times 10 times 8 times 10. And remember, when you're multiplying, it doesn't matter what order, so you could have worked it out as 3 times 8 times 10 times 10 if you wanted. So that's 24 times 10 times 10. So you're moving your digits 2 places to the left, and then you would end up with your 2,400. Okay, so have a go at the practice questions. Each time I want you to set them out like, let's find one I've not scribbled on, like this one here. So write down the formula, write down the values of your base and height, and then work out your answer. Okay, so good luck with those, and I'll see you tomorrow when we're going to look at triangles that are not right angled.